From NBC News in Washington, this is Meet the Press with Tim Russert.
And Maria, out in Sun Valley, when you talked to the governor of California about appearing on Meet the Press, did you give him fair warning about what he may expect from Tim?
Well, I was listening to everybody talking about how prepared Tim was. Tim was I thought was so interesting the way he tried to get people to come on the program, talking about being prepared. He'd hound you for months on end, and he would always call me. I remember after when Arnold was running, then after he was elected, he would call me all the time to check on me, see how I was doing. Then he'd kind of veer the question to, Arnold needs to come on this show. He can't get respect until he comes on the show. It's rite of passage. He needs to be on this show, and, he's not going to be anybody until he comes on this show. And eventually, he was right, and I saw people on the Republican side prepare to go on that show, and I saw my uncle on the Democratic side sit down and prepare to go on that show, and people were equally terrified, I think, to go on that show, and they also prepared because, as everybody said, they knew Tim was also going to be prepared, and they knew it was a rite of passage.
James,
but I loved the way he'd go after people to get on that show. He really worked that angle just as much as being prepared once they finally agreed.
I always thought that if Tim had gone into the priesthood, he would have been a cardinal, or maybe
a pope.
I was going to say, the first Holy Father from this country. If he'd gone into politics, he certainly would have been a governor and maybe president of the United States. He had enormous ambition, and people need to know about that, and I mean it in the right sense of the word. He had this path that he could never have imagined as a working-class kid from Buffalo that would take him to the summit, and he wasn't going to forfeit his opportunities along the way.
And ambition is a worthy thing, though, if it's put in the purpose of the country.
Right.
And I think it's important for people to understand that. A couple weeks ago, when Teddy Kennedy was diagnosed with his brain tumor, we were talking about the fact that Rose Kennedy had once said to me that if her children who died young could come back, meaning Joe Jr. and Jack and Bobby, they would still choose the lives they'd been given to lead, even though they had shortness of years, because they had such productivity, such achievement. And Tim said to me, I would feel that way too. If I didn't have any more right now, I've had the life that I've wanted to lead, except that I want to see Luke grow up. I want to see him have a child. I want to have him be a father. And I just keep thinking about how extraordinary his life was, just as Mike said. Everything he had, he loved. He said, I love my family, I love sports, I love this program. The people around him loved him, so he led a full life. He just wasn't given the length of years that he deserved.
There was, Tom, to your point about Tim, may have been a cardinal or a pope. He was very Catholic in the big C definition of the faith. And he was a Jesuit-educated Catholic, and he brought to this table, to this forum, to his life, elements of what we used to call working priests, Jesuits and Maryknolls, dealing with people who are damaged, the most vulnerable among us. That's what he brought to his life, this program, each and every day. He recognized the flaws in human beings and in themselves.
Tom, one of the things that reminds me of, this has been a horrible weekend, and one of the most calming, soothing things was told to me by a friend of ours who used to work with this program, Colette Rooney. And she was talking about how there was this long line of Irish Catholic Pauls who were all talking to each other and always told stories, and he was a great Irish storyteller. But that she was comforted by the idea that somewhere Mary McGrory and perhaps Moynihan are standing there holding the door open saying, catch me up on what's been going on. I hear it's been a great year.
The only comfort I've found in the events of the last several days is that, in many ways, it's the greatest year of Tim's life. He was so proud of all the work that Maureen was doing for Vanity Fair, the big story on Sarkozy recently, the seminal work that she did in Russia and what was going on. Luke graduates from Boston College, and the greatest political year of the last 50 years. Tim was in the midst of that, morning, noon, and night.
And he did not want that primary season to end. He just, he would say, okay, this is the last Tuesday night. There can't possibly be, no, bring it on, more, and he just, that enthusiasm that he brought to it, and he loved every minute of it. He loved every minute.
I have to say, though, that Tim did not mind really being challenged. There was an episode last year this time, actually, when Don Imus had his famous blow-up. And he wanted to do an entire program about it. He appeared on the program a lot. He was friends with Don. but he wanted to talk about the uproar. And Betsy called and said, do you want to come and talk about it? I said, I don't know if that's a good idea, because what I might have to say, Tim might not like. And then Tim called and said, no, you need to come and say what it is you believe. Yeah. And he allowed me to come into his house and do this.
All right. Do we have that? We have the actual tape, I think, of him.
We do? Oh, okay.
All right. Gwen Ifill and Tim Russert after Don Imus.
There's been radio silence from a lot of people who've done this program, who could have spoken up and said, I find this offensive, or I didn't know. These people didn't speak up. Tim, we didn't hear that much from you. My point about that, after that, a lot of people said, oh, you spoke truth to power. You really got in Russert's grill that day. And I said to every single person, you know, I don't know anybody who would have said, come on in my house and tell me that. And he let me do that. He encouraged me to do that. And even if we disagreed, we were still friends, because it was okay to disagree, because it taught him something he didn't know. It opened his mind, which he wanted to be, to an alternate point of view.
You know what's so amazing? Old Machiavelli used to say it's better to be feared than loved if you're a political figure, if you want power. And the incredible thing was he was feared by the people who came on here because they didn't want to screw up. But on the other hand, he was loved. I mean, he managed to do both things, which is so rare, to have authority and love.
He never, and that's not always across the board in this town, he never left anybody. He stood up for his friends, and it wasn't that we just loved him. He loved his friends and took care of them. And unlike most of this town, which is transactional, you weren't just his friend when you were in. If you're out of office, he still called you, and he still was. He just was loved because he was such a lover of his friends.
He had that reservoir of loyalty that so few people have. And I would think especially in this city where I don't live, but I've always likened it to what I call elevator loyalty. That you and I are going from the 6th floor to the 1st floor, and I'm your friend and I'm very loyal. We get out, you go that way, I go that way, and I'm killing you half a block away. Tim was loyal. He was loyal. You were his friend. He admired you, or he liked you, or whatever. He would remain loyal to you through thick and thin. Through Don Imus, he was loyal to Don. He understood Gwen and learned from that experience, as we all did.
Yeah, he did.
And loyalty is such a rare commodity.
Well, speaking of loyalty, we all know that Tim Russert grew up in South Buffalo, working class family. He wrote about it with Big Russ and me, and even though he rose to the heights of being one of the most important journalists in America, a guy who could drive the political debate in this country, had all the good fortune that goes with the success that he had, he never forgot his Buffalo roots. This is the Buffalo News. I think it's mute testimony to how they felt about him in his hometown. And we thought we would share with you just a few of the hundreds of thousands of references to Buffalo and everything connected to Buffalo that we heard on this broadcast.
For Big Russ, his buddies back in Buffalo who helped make this country great, for the city of Buffalo, and for all the underdogs in this country and around the world, go you Buffalo Bills. Go Sabres. Bring it home. We want the cup. How about those Boston College Eagles on to the Sweet 16? Go Eagles. Go Bills. Get those skins. Sorry about those Bills, but how about those Sabres? St. Albans Bulldogs 25, the Gonzaga Eagles 20. Yesterday, God was not purple. He was wearing Bulldog blue. And hey, Buffalo Sabres, nice job. 10 in a row. Make me proud. Go Bills. Squish the fish. Hold the emails. I know dolphins are mammals, but, you know, squish the fish. If it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press, and oh, yes, go Bills.
You know, Tom.
He was beyond shameless about this.
But he loved me. I'm telling you, Saturday night, I'm watching the LSU football game. And then score a touchdown, 10:30. I look on myself, he said, can you believe LSU just scored? I'm so happy for you. And I felt like, man, you got to go to sleep. You got to do the show tomorrow. If you were pulling for a team and you were a friend of his, he'd be pulling for the team. You know, everybody. Right. He said, Jacob has to.
Thursday night, I'm in New York. The Celtics-Lakers game is going on out on the coast. The Celtics, phenomenal comeback. I'm trying to fall asleep in a hotel room. Phone rings. Hey, buddy, you see what's going on out there? You see the run they're putting on?
And that was, when I talk about that kind of little boy, he had enthusiasm for the Bills, but if he followed his friends' teams. And I'm in Tiger Stadium. Jacob Haskell makes a first down and my phone rings in the middle of 92,000 people.
I love Buffalo that even at one point when he asked me, what are you going to do after Lincoln? I said, what can I do anything after Lincoln? I certainly can't go back to Millard Fillmore. And he said, no, wait, Millard Fillmore came from Buffalo. Don't say bad things about Millard Fillmore.
You know, that's how I got hired here. The real reason I got my job at NBC is because I had lived for 4 formative years in Buffalo, New York.